Okay, I think we are good. Hey everyone, welcome to What's the Tea? My name is Zach, and if you haven't been here before, this is our weekly interview show. So every Tuesday at 2 p.m., we typically interview another staff member. Um, this week we're doing a little bit different. We're going to interview a former staff member. So I'd like to thank Mitch for coming on to our show. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Exciting.
So you worked for South Suburban for how long?
Just under 5 years. So, like from November of 2013 to sometime in the summer of 18. So, just under 5 years.
So one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about was the formation of the Bro Group. So I've mentioned it a few times on here. It's our it's our psychoeducational group for boys from 5th grade to 8th grade, and it's an 8-week program, and we'll get into a little bit of the details of it, but that's basically what it is. Kids who have been affected by domestic violence in the home, and we run these groups for 8 weeks in school. So, and you were part of the formation of that, right, Mitch?
Yeah. When we started, there was I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 of us that would meet weekly to kind of get it going and think of the activities and the connections to, respect and that mutual respect wheel. So, yeah, it was part of that initial group that started to get it going.
So do you remember the first thought of it, or what the main idea was, or what we wanted to accomplish with the group?
Yeah, well, I think it's always been, or it was always like the idea was like a cross between intervention and prevention. You see this need of obviously kids who have seen domestic violence are more likely to become abusive themselves, especially boys. So having that need, I think that was always kind of the base. And then we wanted to do initially was um, have it like in our office there and have clients, kids, or just people from the public actually part of it, which turned out to be more difficult because then you have to have people kind of crossing that next step of saying I am a victim and coming to acceptance with that, which if they're not in therapy for it or not working with anybody for it, that's not always easy. So it kind of turned from that, and then we just said, well, let's try out the school since we were already there, which turned out to work well because then we could kind of phrase it as not phrase it, but connect it to community violence, which the effects are very similar of witnessing community violence and domestic violence. So that's kind of how it formed from what we wanted. But I think it always at the base was that there's a need. We were the prevention team, so there's that cross between prevention and intervention that, especially in those grades, 5th to 8th grade, those are pivotal years, to becoming a man. So at least how they're starting to develop that image of themselves. So I think that's what it was always kind of grounded in, is that need for it.
So, and I'm looking, is it true that it's based off a little bit off that Duluth model that's used often with like our PAPE groups, and like what was sort of the process with picking some of these topics that we talk about? Because a lot of them are really, all of them really, I think are super important. A couple of them are like accountability, respect, treating family members correctly. So where did those come in?
Yeah, well, I think we had people that worked in PAPE and, as part of this initial thing. So I think it was kind of like a mini PAPE group, but without the necessity of them being abusive in it. So we did look through a lot of Duluth. We looked through a bunch of different curriculums. It was actually the Step Up curriculum, I think, is where we got the mutual respect wheel from, which that just came in my head now as you were talking about it. So yeah, the Step Up. And a lot of the activities we pulled are right from Step Up. And then some we obviously morphed a lot and kind of just molded it around domestic violence then. So, obviously you have to be, accountability in every one of those topics that we covered in it. So that's a big part of it. But a lot of it came from that Step Up. And then with the background knowledge of, we kind of want it similar, at least format-wise, of PAPE.
Interesting. So how was it received in the beginning when you were bringing up the idea? Did it take a while to kind of see what you wanted to see?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, even when I left, we were still like, hey, let's get it at the office, let's get it outside of schools, because then we could really, be sure that these kids are witnessing that at home. But it took a minute. We had a good relationship with several of the schools that I think you guys are still in, and a couple other ones that they were like, okay, let's see how it goes. A couple of the schools' principals it caught their ear. So that's how we really started getting rolling, just those relationships we already had. And I think people see that it's something for a group for boys who maybe have some um, behavior issues or behavior problems in school or at home. And unfortunately, there's no lack of need for that. So I think those relationships, and then once we started doing that, more schools kind of started buying in with it.
Yeah, and I'll give people who are listening at home a little bit more context because as of now, like when we never crossed paths with our jobs. So when I came back, people were definitely requesting the bro group. So that's something that I've been working on pre-COVID is getting these groups back together, which has been a lot of fun, a huge learning experience. I've probably learned more from running the bro groups than almost anything I've done here. So what were some of those lessons that you were learning from running these groups?
Oh man, I always told the kids, and I wasn't even like I wasn't lying about it or wasn't exaggerating. Like I always learned more in my own life than I think I taught anybody. I was like, I learned more from this groups. But a lot of it, I like preparing. You get this like lesson plan, whatever, like almost lesson plan and activities, and we're going to talk about this. And I'm going to ask these questions, and then you get in group, and one of the kids is dealing with something, or one time a kid at the school was shot and killed that weekend and we were there on a Monday. So like there's always something. Obviously that's the extreme case, but there's always something that's like, it's not going to go the way you planned it exactly. And I still, maybe to a fault, kind of just roll with it. Like let's just roll with whatever we got. If there's an issue with a kid or an issue with a behavior, it's obviously that's at the forefront and that's what's important. So as long as you could connect it to what we're talking about, which with accountability you can. So that's a big one, is that don't always expect it to go exactly how it's planned and roll with it because those needs are going to come up. And then in terms of from like kids, like they want to be heard. The most difficult students I had in those groups at some point wanted to be heard, right? They didn't just want to cause problems in the group. They liked being in the group. One of my co-facilitators, Terry, and I, we always made this observation that at the beginning, they were always like, why are we here? Why are we here? Why are we here? And then at week 8, they're like, that's it? Where are you going? Right? Or you missed a week and they're like, where were you? So they want to be there. And even if they're putting up that front or that wearing that mask of I don't care, that they're getting something out of it. They're at least hearing, they're at least having that safe person to talk to even, if they're just telling you how their day is or what sport they like or whatever it is, they at least have that one person that they can go to if they have no one else. And that's something that was difficult to kind of think of in the moment, like that they want to be here because, you get frustrated with not getting through to them or whatever it may be, but always kind of thinking, no, they want to be here. We are making some sort of difference, if only minor.
Yeah, I think I can say I've experienced that as well, both with the planning and sort of that rapport building, because there's always a reason to hit a pause on the group. As you were saying in the beginning, it's like kids I've experienced, they always want to like, oh, can I go to the bathroom or can I get out of this group or I've got to do this thing. But then as you're saying, week 6, 7, and 8, it's like they want the group to just start from the beginning all over again. So do you have any insights on building that rapport with the kids that maybe you didn't know from the beginning?
Consistency. That's like the biggest thing. And I've learned that while teaching too, is like you have to be consistent. And just a lot of the times like be you. When you're in a group of, you got 8 7th graders, 8 6th graders, like there's, you have to be professional obviously, but just like relax and be you in there. And because they really know. They know if you're just kind of blowing smoke or not. So just being you and obviously staying consistent. Because if they see you every week and you're the same every week in terms of the messages and the openness and not judgmental and all those things, if you're consistent, then they start to trust you and start to believe you. Even just showing up, like as silly as that sounds, just showing up every week. Like I said, we've missed a couple weeks sometimes for whatever it may be. And they're like, where were you? Like the kids who seem like they didn't care. They're like, where were you? So just showing up and being consistent with that message of, hey, we're here for you guys, is to help us get better. And then again, that non-judgmental part, I always gave them examples of like me and how I'm using the information to be like, guys, it's not just for you to get better. I'm trying to grow and get better in these areas too. So it made them, allowed them to be a little bit more open and like, oh, okay, we're not terrible kids because we're in here. We can all learn from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that as well. Just the authenticity part of it. It's especially when you're sending messages like about like accountability and respect and these kinds of things. Like if it's not authentic, they know right away, and it's going to be hard for them to listen. So I want to frame it a little bit again for people who don't know the group as well, because I want to talk about like what a good 8-week session would look like. And so I guess one of the first things I want to get across maybe is what's the beginning of the group like? What are the reactions to, hey, we're forming this bro group around these important concepts? So what kinds of reactions do we normally get in the beginning?
Yeah, and the way we tried a bunch of different things like to start. We even tried at one point like these like in almost like not interviews, but like 2-on-1s. There would be 2 facilitators and the one person, almost as like a goal setting thing before the group starts. We've tried to do like a little family violence presentation that first week. We've tried a couple different things, and I think it's regardless of how you do it that first week, it's going to take a minute, because they think they're in trouble. Anytime in school you get brought out, you're either in trouble or they think, oh, I need, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I don't act out. And then, you tell them, oh, it's because of family violence, or you start talking about family violence and they get defensive. So I think it's just being patient with that part. And I like just doing an overview of, my favorite was just giving them the wheel. Like, here's the wheel, the mutual respect wheel. What are you good at on there? Right? What do you think? Are you good at communicating respectfully? Are you good at being honest? And then once you start having that conversation a little bit, okay, well, what do I need to improve on now? So that's the way I like to start it, is just kind of overviewing everything, because you could kind of tie a lot of the topics in together. If I remember right, communicating respectfully is that first one.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's throughout the entire, 8 weeks anyways, is how you communicate. So it's kind of taking a broader view of it. And it's almost like you're selling it to them. Because again, they're like, I'm in trouble, or I'm missing class, or I'm missing gym or recess. Like, what am I doing here? So it's just kind of trying to make it relaxed, and you're not in trouble. Let's have some fun. Let's talk. So kind of like you're selling it to them even.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that as well. You can't expect to go too deep into that session that first day. That rapport is huge, and getting them to be there week 2 is huge for us. We did a few groups that weren't in schools. We did them at a community center.
Okay.
So that was a big thing. Also, like, hey, tell your parents, like, this is the next session, things along those lines.
Did you have good attendance at those, like, as it went forward?
It was okay. We had we had 1 or 2 common. I think there was 8, and 1 or 2 students were commonly like not consistently going, and not being dropped off, things like that. So overall was good, but of course you had better attendance in school. It's just they've got that system down already, and then when we add something after school, it's just more logistics.
Yeah, well, and that also goes to like the what we talk about in like the 20-hour training from like an external motivation. So like in school they have to go, And then by the end of the 8 weeks, they want to go. That's that, you know, they have that internal motivation to want to go. So that it's kind of difficult after school or community centers or whatever it may be. They don't have necessarily that push.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I was wondering about, because it's COVID-19 right now, I mean, everyone knows this, and this is one of the reason why we can't do bro right now. And and it's sometimes, I think if you haven't been a part of the groups before, you don't realize how much that interaction is so important, and being on your feet and doing things with your hands, and not just drilling a message. So did you learn any lessons about sort of like play versus curriculum and talking, and how you go about that?
Yeah, I think it's like trusting in the activities that you have, you know, because sometimes it's almost like trying to tell myself like there is a connection. I swear there's a connection. Where's the connection? But if you're doing the activities and I mean, they're research based, right? You got to trust those activities are maybe not always direct lessons, but if you trust those and go with those, especially when they're moving around activities, it gets them to buy in. And sometimes they're not even sure directly while they're doing it what they're learning. Like we would do activities about body language, and I'd tell a couple of the people to use like red body language, so like aggressive body language, while they're doing a little interview, and some of them didn't know, right? So in the middle of it, they're like, why is this person being, like, why are they leaning in? Why are they, you know, doing that? And then you have that discussion after. So it's like an indirect learning experience. But those are always the better ones, especially for younger kids. Like I remember doing fifth grade groups, and which is funny now because I taught fifth grade last year and fourth grade this year. But when we were doing the bro groups, we were like, the discussion was not there. Like you couldn't like sit down and discuss as long. Whereas some of the eighth grade groups, maybe the whole hour and a half or however much time we had, you were just discussing because they were into it. But a lot with the younger kids, trust those activities. Do them twice, do them 3 times. Sometimes it seems repetitive to us as adults, but you know, the kids are like, no, that's cool. Oh, this is different this time a little bit. So I think it's just trusting those activities is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was maybe the biggest lesson I had, was going with the activities, just because they have fun with it. And I think it's easy to just be like, we have to really get this message across, but sometimes, you know, that's how you get that buy-in. They know it's going to be fun. They want to come back that next week. They're a little bit more receptive to that message. So
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. I'll be honest, but that's part of it. Is like you said, you learned a lot about yourself too.
Right. And if you sneak like in those activities, like if you can sneak in like in, you know, these direct questions while they're doing it, you know, it's like we played like trivia baseball. It was trivia, but I had them like run around the room like baseball, you know, like they're playing baseball. So it's almost like not tricking, but like disguising the lesson within a fun activity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then one more thing I wanted to get to is, now that you mentioned a few times you're a teacher now, so how have all these lessons from, especially bro, but you can even say prevention because those are classroom lessons, how did that help you for your teaching job?
I mean, I use this stuff regularly from bro. Like the other day, I pulled out the old PowerPoint and did a lesson on taking a timeout. Right. So I still use a lot of the lessons. I think it took a minute. Once I started getting more comfortable teaching, then I'm like, oh, wait, this fits in here. This, like, they fit in all over the place. You know, we teach social emotional learning. That's exactly what prevention and specifically bro is about too. So, I mean, I used not all the curriculum. I use the concepts all the time. And now I see way more of the real life side of it, right? Like when you meet with a group once a week, sure, you get to know them over 8 weeks, but still not too much, right? You can't learn too much about them. But as you're with them every day in class, even if they're kids who don't talk a lot, you hear them talk to others, interact. You see, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of like signs of them experiencing abuse at home, or seeing domestic violence, or seeing community violence. So you see a lot of that. And I think it just helps me to not, I don't know, to handle it the right way. And not that I always do, but at least the knowledge of okay, this may be happening. Maybe that's trauma that's, coming out in that negative behavior. So I think a lot of that is almost every day it pops in my head in one way or another. And I use it all the time. What's the movie? Was it Tough Guys? I reference that movie way too often, probably. They're like, what? But just like the stereotypes of what it means to be a man. And so if that's in my head, now when I'm interacting with someone and they're like, men don't cry. Like it's not funny, but it's funny how often the kids say things like that in real life. When you're watching a video or a movie, you're like, man, that's fake. They don't. And then so often they like directly, it's like it comes out of a book. So just having that experience and like not being shocked by it, not being, reactionary to it, just kind of having that empathy and background knowledge, I think is huge. Especially now, like when we started this year, all being online and everything, CPS specifically put a huge emphasis on social emotional learning because these kids are at home. Maybe they haven't interacted with their friends. Maybe they haven't been able to talk to an adult about whatever's happening. Maybe, they're experiencing something at home, whatever it may be. The big thing is social emotional learning. So to have just that tool bag of this is what we can go to, we can talk about accountability. Like accountability is my number one expectation in the room. So I always connect that still. So just having that background knowledge of it is huge because, again, everyday life, this stuff is real. And I found that while I was when you're doing presentations every day, especially the presentations, because it almost becomes like repetitive and it sounds like, I'm just saying words. But that's where those bro groups were cool because you're actually talking to the kids and, hearing the stories and all this different stuff. So having that background knowledge and just experiencing those conversations, I think is huge.
Awesome. So that was a great answer. I had some follow-up questions, but you were just hitting them all. So I think that covers that. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss about grow or prevention or your time at SSFS?
I mean, I already said it, but I learned honestly more like how to be a better human working at South Suburban Family, just like in my own life. And even when it feels like it's repetitive because you're doing it every day, there's stuff that come up all the time. And I'm like, oh, that's from there. So, I mean, the prevention program is awesome. The community education program is awesome. I enjoyed it a lot. And then it led me where I'm at now. I would have never been a teacher if I didn't do it because my degree was in social work. I was always going to be a social worker of some sort. And then once I'm in the classrooms, I'm like, oh, hey, this is pretty cool. I like this. So that kind of led me down the path where I'm at. So, like I said, rolling with it, I kind of just rolled with it like, oh, that's where it led me. Because even going into working there, I didn't have like a thought I'm going to work with this population or this population. I was just like, I need a job. And so it wasn't a passion, but I mean, the environment at the office and all the coworkers, and then, you develop a passion for it, which is awesome. And it's honestly, led me to where I'm at. I mean, I still I got my statistics and everything that I always have still, like that I reference constantly, which my friends are like, yeah, we get it, dude. It's Friday night. But I mean, it shaped who I am and how I try to, and not always great, right? But I always how I try to interact with my students a lot too. So it's cool, and it's cool to see you guys kind of continuing to grow it. I mean, from the number of people to different things like doing this, What's the Tea, and everything that you guys continue to grow. It's awesome to watch too. It's almost like you keep a side eye on it, like, oh, that's cool. I was part of that once, So yeah. It was awesome.
Absolutely. We're always trying to build on that next thing, and try not to let those lessons that you learned, not get passed on and things like that. So I remember when we were starting the groups back up, we brought you into the office and just asked you questions just like this for 45 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, what's going, that's again, the biggest thing is just roll with what's in front of you to the best of your ability. Like I said, that I mentioned that I showed up at a school on a Monday and a kid had been shot and killed that weekend. And that was like, and it was just me. My co-facilitator wasn't going to be able to make it that day. And so I'm sitting there like, how do we do this? And it was the day where you talk about feelings. And I'm sure you found that talking about feelings with boys in 5th to 8th grade is like pulling teeth. You're like, yes, you have feelings, I promise. So it was like that experience I'll probably never forget, because I handed them the picture of the iceberg, and usually in that session, I never had luck. Like they'd write down like angry. I'm like, no, besides angry. Mad. No. Say right. But that day I handed it to about the 5 kids that were there, and they filled the page. And it was disheartening, obviously, because they had all these super strong negative feelings. But it was like an aha moment for me, which I love when they have the aha moments. I was like, oh, wow, let's use this terrible, thing that happened, but let's use it to make some positive growth here, at least to help identify them. So that experience will never, I don't think, leave my mind, just because it was powerful for me, and obviously for them too, because they suffered a giant loss too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mitch, thank you for coming on today. This has been, I think, a great conversation so far.
Yeah, no, man, I love having this conversation. Like I said, I always have it with my friends, and they're like, why are we talking? So I love coming on and having these sort of conversations. So it's great, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, maybe we'll have an episode 2 in the works in the future. But for now, I think we could put a pause on that. So everyone who's listening, if you wouldn't mind sharing it, commenting, and liking. If you do have questions about the Bro Group, we're not doing them right now, but we plan to in the future, depending on what the situation is like. So let us know if you're interested in that as well. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week with a different team, but we'll be here at the same time in the same place. So thanks everyone for listening. Mitch, thank you again.
Thank you for having me, man. It was a good time.